Now, as you know, Australia hates COVID, and Australia loves a lockdown.
A short 5-day lockdown.
That is why this 3-day lockdown is absolutely necessary.
Why we need this 3-day lockdown to get on top of all of the contacts.
Until the end of the lockdown period.
Why do I say that we love a lockdown? Because over and over and over again, the leaders who have gone before the polls in the period of time between the pandemic and, as late as Tasmania yesterday, the premiers who made those snap lockdown decisions have been richly rewarded with significant electoral victories, the most recent, of course, in Tasmania yesterday. So put simply, while I and many others have been sitting here for the best part of a year pointing out all of the not-so-silent victims as a result of lockdowns, of the panic of these power-mad premiers, the truth is that Australians love this type of leadership. They love the idea of zero cases. So when you see a place like India that has been in an absolute hellhole, in part because it is such a massive country, in part because there is so much poverty in that country, Australians have been panicked to think that this is something that might come back towards Australia, reasonably, unreasonably, fairly or unfairly. People can see that India every single day is beating its own records. Just 2 days ago, it had a world record of about 350,000 cases a day. In the past 24 hours, that has now been supplanted by 400,000 cases that have taken place in the past 24 hours. That's why Australia decided to pause all flights from India. And then when we heard that a couple of cricketers may have found a way through the back door, there was an attempt to lock a loophole. And then in the past couple of days, there has been, well, a massive step up. That people could go to jail or be fined about tens of thousands of dollars if, for whatever reason, they were able to find their way from India back to Australia. Now, this has been a controversial policy and one that many are voicing as a huge mistake.
That international border will be closed for longer than it needs to be because Scott Morrison has bungled his 2 key responsibilities: to get the vaccination rolled out safely and quickly and effectively, and to manage the quarantine system. The defining stuff-ups of this pandemic here in Australia are directly the responsibility of Scott Morrison.
Really? Scott Morrison's responsible for the Victorian government deciding to go with security guards. Scott Morrison is responsible for how they run things in Queensland, where just 40% of the doctors who work in hotel quarantine had been vaccinated. If you've been paying attention to the details, you know that the Australian government has a responsibility for the national border, then state governments have responsibilities for hotel quarantine. In the past couple of hours, plenty of people have been pointing fingers that the decision to send people to jail or fine them within an inch of their life if they find a way to come back from India is borderline racist, something that the government strongly denies.
Absolutely not in any way. The decision which has been made under the Biosecurity Act on the basis of the advice from the Chief Medical Officer is a temporary pause on returns and is entirely founded in the advice of the Chief Medical Officer. That's what invokes the operation of the Biosecurity Act. What is most important is that it is temporary.
Now, I don't like this policy. I don't believe that we should be banning people who are Australian citizens from being able to return to their own country, because ultimately there is a buffer zone here that is hotel quarantine. But how many elections do people need to see what the Australian people want? Whether you like it or not, they want zero cases. They want to make sure that there are huge controls on people coming back, even, yes, Australians coming home to their own country. But let's call out some of the BS that happens here. There is not about to be a flood of people coming back from India when we decide to reopen that border, or an extra flood of people coming from South Africa, the UK, the US, or anywhere else. Because it is National Cabinet and the states that will decide how many people are allowed to return at any one time. Yes, the federal government has its decision, but because hotel quarantine is run by the states, they get to decide how many people can go into the buffer zone at any one time. And remember, everywhere from Queensland, the Northern Territory, Tasmania and Western Australia, every one of those premiers or chief ministers has been re-empowered by the populace to continue to take a hard line. regardless of whether we like it or not. And as for when we are going to have even more people returning to the country, the American ambassador, Australia's ambassador rather, to the United States, Arthur Sinodinos, has said, put simply, not till the world is vaccinated. And that's going to be a little while off. So whether you like it or not, sadly, get used to it, because this is what people love. 0 cases. They vote for it time after time after time after time. No matter how reasonable, justified or unjustified many of these lockdowns are. Now, I'll continue to point out the flaws, I'll continue to point out the inconsistencies, but at some point in time, look at the scoreboard. And the scoreboard is that Australia has an incredibly good record when it comes to COVID-19. If there have been mistakes, it has been out of hotel quarantine, which are run by the states. But as long as the national border remains tight, then we get to see pictures from places like India and say, thank God that's not us. Fair or unfair, that's how people feel right now.